So today is about HANA Core Data Services, and our presenter is John Andre from IT Partners. John, go ahead and take it from here.
Okay. Yeah, so today we're just gonna, I'm gonna try to introduce you all to Core Data Services, CDS, and let me just pull up the PowerPoint. So just for the first part here, I'm gonna be using the PowerPoint, but after this I'm just gonna try to show you examples that kind of explain the way CDS works, how we'd use it in a program, and some of the other features that CDS offers to ABAP developers and people who are using, traditional SAP NetWeaver systems like CRM, ECC, things like that. So let's see. So that's me. If you all, I think I know pretty much everyone here.
Hey, John, you collapse that GoToMeeting pane on the right with the orange.
Oh yeah. There you go.
All right.
And like Tony said, yeah, I'm a developer here at IT Partners. And a couple months back, I started doing some research on, the future, I guess. So how we're going to code in the future now that we have this HANA database, and what it's going to mean for traditional ABAP developers. So our agenda today is just I'm going to explain what CDS is, how to create it. I'm going to go through a very basic CDS example. And from there, I'm going to go to two more examples that illustrate some group by functions, which basically lets you perform aggregate data on database tables. I'm going to show you some parameters. And then lastly, I'm going to show you the HANA CDS, which is a little bit different than the ABAP CDS. And I'll show you how to use native SQL to access this. So just starting off, Core Data Services is a data definition language that was created by SAP initially just on the HANA database side. And just to explain what that means, so you have a HANA database, which it really is just a database in ways. It stores your data, you retrieve it, you do selects against tables and things like that. But in addition to that, HANA has the ability to process data. It also is a application server. So basically what SAP wanted to do was, in the way you have on the ABAP side, you have like the data dictionary where you can define, structures, table structures, data types, and things like that. On the HANA side, you have HANA CDS where you can define your structures, tables, and it just gives you a structured way to do that. So, if you were just going to look up what CDS was, you might go online, you say, oh, great, here's HANA CDS, that's what I want. But the truth is that HANA CDS is more for a database administrator. So if you wanted to create a table, you can also create views. You want to create data types on the HANA database side, you would use HANA CDS to achieve those things. But the issue is, if you're programming in ABAP, if the data dictionary doesn't know about a view or a table, which is exactly what would happen if you created on the HANA side, then you cannot access that. Your system doesn't understand what's out there on the HANA side if it wasn't defined in the data dictionary. So what you really are looking for when you're programming for HANA is the ABAP CDS. Now the ABAP CDS doesn't let you define tables or structures the way the HANA CDS lets you do, but it does let you define views and table functions. Table functions won't be covered today, but I am going to go over a few different ways to create these ABAP CDS views. Okay.
Hey, John.
Yes.
Can you just go back for a minute to that prior one, and just for the folks that haven't been following your blog,
okay,
just give them a little idea of what the concept of the code pushdown is and why it's so.
Okay, different. Sorry, that was coming up on this next slide here. Okay. So sorry, yeah. So yeah, like Tony said, the point is that traditionally what you would do is you would have a ABAP program. You would say, okay, let me go to my database and pull back all my data, bring it into an internal table, bring it into my ABAP program, and process everything line by line and produce a result for the user. But with the advent of, all these in-memory processing and things like that, it makes more sense now, instead of doing all your processing on the ABAP server, to instead push your logic down to the HANA database. Because the HANA database, in addition to storing your data, can also process your data much faster than it would take you to bring it back into your own program. And that's where the code to data paradigm comes from. Instead of bringing all your data over, what you're going to do is say, okay, there's some very processing intensive logic that we have to create. So instead of just doing it all in our program, let's just communicate to the database layer that we want you to sum, as you're bringing in all these records, we want you to take a sum of all the records of all the sales orders that we're bringing in, send back the sum to me, and that way when I'm pulling the data back in, I don't have to pull in, a million records. I can have the total sum of all of the sales orders open for SAP or, Coca-Cola. And what CDS does is it allows us to have a reusable way to do this. So for a project now, instead of just having an ABAP developer, you might have an ABAP developer and a CDS view developer. The CDS view developer will create the logic that will be pushed down to the database, and then the ABAP developer in his program would be consuming these CDS views with smaller data sets that's already been processed in the way they want it, and then they can just use it and display it for the user on the ABAP server side. Now, something I need to say about ABAP CDS, when they were designing this, they designed this with HANA in mind. But the way they designed it was that it's an open data definition language. And what that means is that it will work really well for HANA, but even if your underlying database is a traditional, not in-memory database, but, hard disk platters and things like that, it will still work in those instances. Not as well, of course. It won't be as fast, but you would not have to modify this to work with HANA. It'll work on traditional databases, HANA databases, whatever's there. But when you use it with HANA, the combination works really well. So let's see. I think my instance should be up now, so I'm going to go ahead and get out of this PowerPoint. Whoops. Okay. So let's go back to here. Okay. So from here, just to launch back into our RDP, once your status is active, I'm sure you all did this if you were setting up your license keys. We're just going to hit connect, and we're going to go to this remote desktop. So you can hit connect here. And from here, just follow the prompts. You want to connect. You put in your password. If you haven't connected yet, this will be the same password used for everything. This is the password you provided when you were setting up your instance in the cow. And hit yes. And you should see your desktop. I'll give you a few seconds if you're a little behind here.
Wow, wouldn't it be great if Citrix at DLA worked as fast as this just did?
Really? Yeah, and there's even copy paste across systems, which I really wish they had. But okay, so now that we're on our desktop here, you'll see your familiar SAP logon, or SAP logon, sorry, which will still take you into the system. Everything will be set up in here. You'll have your system access, but the requirement for CDS creation, ABAP CDS creation, and it seems like all these data pushdown technologies going forward, is that you create all your developments in this SAP DevTools Eclipse. So just the Eclipse editor. So if you double click on there, it'll open it up, and this will take a little bit. It'll load in files and things like that. Yeah, and I guess while this is loading, you don't have to follow along on this part, but just to show you all, if you've never really used one of these AWS instances, it will have your system already loaded all the information to connect. All you need to do is double click, and they will provide a few usernames, but the one we'll be using for this is developer. Sorry if it's a little laggy here. There it goes. Okay. So yeah, I mean, you just use developer. Again, it's the same password for all these things. But if you wanted to log in to browse in the traditional SAP way, you still have the SAP login, but you won't be able to create your CDS views using SAP GUI. All right, so now when Eclipse opens, this is a screen you should see in front of you. Now, as a quick overview of what Eclipse is, really it's just a really fancy text editor. It's almost like a notepad, but with, with a ton more features. And if you were there for Jason's presentation on, SAP HANA and SAP Express, you should already be familiar with the Eclipse editor. But you'll see that when we were working with just SAP Express, we were using mostly this SAP HANA Administration Console and the data modeler. For ABAP developers, they have a different perspective. So these are all called perspectives. This is the ABAP perspective, and this will let you create, anything ABAP. Your programs, classes, function modules, whatever you would have to create. And preloaded should be, you won't see the siege on CDS because this is actually a file that I created here previously, but you'll see these two folders up here. These folders, when you create a project, so if I were to go in here and I wanted to, I could go right-click, new, create a project, or select ABAP projects. So that'll ask you for your login. So basically, it'll find, ask you for your system name, ask you for your login, and it's basically the same thing as logging in through SAP GUI. But preloaded, they should already have this one that says A4H001 developer. And that's the project that we're going to be using today to create our CDS views and our programs and things like that. Okay. Oh, okay. And one last thing. So you can build in a lot of features here. There's a text editor. You can view tables and things like that. But SAP helps design this perspective for Eclipse because you can basically add on your own perspectives to Eclipse. So one thing that they built in was a SAP GUI navigator here. So we can actually navigate to our project, which already knows our username, our password, the system name, and this will actually log us in to a traditional SAP GUI window. So from here, even within Eclipse, we can go to like SE16, whatever you want to do, whatever transaction you can do from SAP GUI, you can actually do it by clicking this GUI symbol and typing in your transaction here. So we won't be using that too much. We may use that to run programs and things like that. Okay, so yeah, now that our overview's over, the way you create a program here, or any objects that you want to create, is you can right-click on this developer one. So not the BW developer one, but the developer folder, and you can go to create a class, function module. But for us, our object isn't listed here, so we're going to go to other. And sorry, before I continue, Tony, were there any questions here, or we're good to keep going?
You're good to keep going.
Okay. So again, I right-clicked on the folder. I hit New, Other, and they have a lot of different technologies you can use in Eclipse. But for us, what we want to create is under ABAP, and we want to create a DDL source file. So we're using CDS, but like I said, CDS is actually a data definition language. So we want to create a DDL source file. We can hit Next. For a package, I usually just use the temp package, so TMP, and that's just like if you were doing a local file on while you're in SAP GUI. They're asking if you want to make it local, if you want to transport or put in a package. I'm just putting the temp package. And for our name here, the name we're going to use, sorry, let me pull this up, is Zjohn CDS view example. And the reason you could name it anything you want, but just to be able to copy and paste the source into here, so you won't have to do any typing, you would have to name it the same name I have here. We'll just do CDS example. Oh, and sorry, one last thing. For you all, you can just type it like this. But for me, since I was creating files for the demo, it wouldn't let me delete the CDS view. So I'm going to have to put a Y in front of it. But you all can actually just, put zjohn CDS view example, copy and paste the code that was provided to you. All right, so here we can hit next. This is taking a while. Okay, and since we put it in the temp folder, it's saying that we don't need to transport. But if you were to do this, in a regular system, this is where you would select your transport and things like that. So you can hit next again. And they'll give you a few templates to work on. So we're going to work on, today we're going to work on just a regular view, associations, parameters, and we're also going to do extending views. But for this one, you can just click this first define view and hit finish.
Hey, John, I have a quick question. So,
okay.
You said that because we were putting it in a temp folder,
yeah,
it did not request the transport. So, is for the guys that are used to using the GUI and creating things like an SE38 or SE80 or
yeah.
SE24, that would be like saying it's a local object.
Yeah, that's correct. It's the same exact thing as saying it's a local object.
Okay.
Okay, so now that we're on this first CDS view example, there are a few things that I just wanted to point out about a CDS source file. So the first thing is you see all these annotations here. These are called annotations. Anything that begins with the @ sign has some information after it. So the only mandatory annotation that you need to have is this SQL view name. And what this basically does is this is the name of the actual view. So down here where you're going to name your CDS entity, it's also a little confusing, this will be a different name than appears here. So when we create this file, it's going to create a view with this name on the HANA database. But for our purposes, when we're using within a program, when we're trying to select from it or anything like that, we'll be using this name here. We will never use this name, explicitly in code. This is only for technical purposes to connect this to the HANA database. And let me just find my source code real quick. Sorry, I'm going to go back to my regular desktop. And let's see, I want to get CDS view example. And if you have these files, this is the file that I was looking at. This is the first example view, zjohn CDS view example. This has been working, the copy and paste across. So if you have it on the other side, you should be able to, you should be able to copy and paste this name in there. And I'm just going to change this back to a Y. So yeah, so now we have our first CDS view example here. And you'll see that, my name that you'll be able to see on the ABAP side is zjohn test view, whatever. And some other annotation, just to go over it real quick, you could basically do a whole presentation on annotations alone because there's literally like a ton of them. You can set your access control. There's also another annotation that lets you specify whether this is a client-specific view or not. All right, so this is the annotation section. This next section is basically where you define your view name and you specify where it's selecting from. So if you wanted to do a join or association, which is basically the same thing, you would put it before this parenthesis right here. In addition, if you wanted to have parameters, and we're going to go over all this later, this is where you would specify all those things. Now, just like any other select that you would do, you have to specify the fields that you want to pull from the table. And this table, by the way, the SNWDSO table, is just a sales order table that they provide in these test systems. So this SAP NetWeaver, for instance, that we have is very bare bones. It has no VBAP, no VBAC. So I was just looking for any table that we could do some joins on, and it will make sense. So it's just a sales order table with a few fields. So we're just going to be pulling data from this sales order table. So yeah, so within the field area right here, this is where you specify what fields you want to pull from this table and place in your view. So here we have, we have like a node key view, and you can rename them here. So the original field from SNWDSO is node key. We're going to rename that to node, just to show you how it's done. There's no real reason for it. So SOID we're calling sales order. Buyer good we're calling buyer ID. Okay? And here is where you're going to start seeing some of the power that the CDS views provide. So there is no field called payment status. We're kind of making this field up on the fly. And the way we're doing that is we're saying, okay, there's a field called billing status. If the billing status field has a P, we're going to say that our payment status field for this record is going to say paid. If the billing status in this SNWDSO table for the record we're looking at is a blank, we're going to say that this field is not paid. And if we have some other condition, which we shouldn't have, but just like a case statement, you want to have a fall through statement. We're going to have a question mark if it's not one of these, but it should be either a P or a blank. And by putting this case statement in here, we're creating a new field that when this CDS view is ran, this data will come back to us. So again, this is like logic that we've inputted into this view, and it'll allow us to create an entirely new field based off of data in the table. So now with your code in here, you can go ahead and hit the activate button, which looks just like the one in SAP GUI. Okay, and that should activate just fine. What's the error here? Oh boy, okay. Do a Y. Oops. Y. Okay, sorry, that's just for me. You all wouldn't have to change that, but again, since I already ran through this, it's remembering that I used that name already. All right, so once it's activated, we can actually go to all of our packages in the SAP system. So if we hit this system library, this will expand out, and these are all the packages that you'll normally see within SAP. But for us, if you put it in the temp folder like I did, you can go into temp, right here, core data services, data definitions, and you should see the CDS view that you just created. Now, for testing purposes, instead of creating a whole program, Eclipse offers a nice feature where you can right-click, and then you can navigate to, where is it? Okay, Open Data Preview. So it's right here. And with that, we can kind of preview what our CDS view is going to look like, during runtime. So here, we see all the fields that we pulled in. These are all from the SNWDSO table. But this field right here is something that we just generated, by coding it in right here. And if, for you all that wanted to see HANA run and see how fast it is, I mean, that's 7 milliseconds is pretty fast. We can even expand this up to probably, I think, 5,000. And it's, 18 milliseconds. So it's very, very fast at pulling back these records. This is being calculated basically on the fly, and it's still able to pull that data back very quickly. So now that we have our first CDS view created, our next step is just going to be to use this within program to show you all how you would do that. To do that, you can click on this temp folder. You can right-click, hit New, and then specify that you want to create an ABAP program. And you can follow the same process, but the program name that I had for this is, let me look at my slides here. It is, actually, let me just copy it. The first example should be somewhere. First example program. Okay. CDS example consume. Okay, so here you have your report source, and this is just like doing it in SAP GUI. So once you get comfortable with it, it's identical to doing this in SE38. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy all the code, then I'm going to hit Control V to paste down our source here, and just go through the steps on how we would consume our CDS view. So it's pretty simple, just like if this were a database table. What we're going to do is we're going to have a data type. We're going to say type table of, and we're going to use our CDS view name. So here I'll change it to Y to make it consistent, and also change it to Y here. Okay. And if you're not familiar with this thing, this is part of the new Open SQL language. So you can, when you're saying into table, you have to put this @ sign before the variable you want to use. Okay, so I'm going to save that, and then I'm just going to activate it. And again, yeah, this is just like, you can replace this with a table. If you know how to select from a table, then you can know how to select from a CDS view. You just put the name in just like you would a table, and now we can run. You select ABAP application. And a very simple output, but you see that we have all these records here, and you see the speed as well. If yours was as fast as mine, I'm hoping. A ton of records come back, and it's almost instantaneous, really. So the HANA database server, and this is like a AWS version, so the production one would even be faster, but you can see the speed that the CDS views provide. Okay, so were there any questions, Tony, or we're still good to go?
No, we're still good to go, but let's take a break for a second
Okay.
and talk what you just did, right? So,
okay.
So the one thing for the developers on the line is everything John is doing inside of Eclipse here is being pushed down into the SAP system, so that if you were logged into the GUI and you went to SE38, you would see this program, just like you would see that view in SE11. So just because you're in Eclipse, right, John? I mean, it's still available via the front-end GUI. It's just that this is where you have to create the views.
Yeah, exactly. And I almost wish that they would give you the option, because it seems completely possible they could have made a transaction for creating CDS views, but they limit it to being able to create all these new technologies within Eclipse.
Okay, and I know in 7.5 and beyond, at some point when we get to that level of ABAP, the two converge, where I think you can be in SE24, for instance, and you could write a method that's in sort of open SQL or this SQL script, and the way this gets pushed down, it gets pushed down that way too.
Okay, well, that's nice.
That's going to be nice, right? But functional guys on the line, right? So maybe what it is for you guys to take away from this is, when John was creating the view, can you go back to where you had the logic for the view? So in the future, when you're designing and you're saying, okay, we need to join this table with that table, we want to aggregate this and sum that and all of this, there may be this other developer, or maybe a developer who's able to do both now, that can create this view and if this business logic is reusable by storing it into a view like this, then multiple developers can access those business rules. It's almost like creating business rules inside of the data services model that HANA provides. So, I just wanted to does anybody have any questions, or is everybody able to load these programs and execute them the way John is?
Yeah, because I'm willing to go back to any steps and slowly go through. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, I didn't see a question. But wait, is there a method for functionals to find what views exist? That was Keith.
Ah, so let's see. That is a good question.
John, can you see this view in SE11 as a core data services view somehow?
Yeah, and that's the thing though. It's because let's I can go into SE11 real quick and
But you wouldn't be using that name, right? It would be this Y John CDS view example. Isn't that in SE11?
Yeah, look, you know what? Let me give that a try real quick. Oh, I keep using the wrong keyboard. SE11.
Right.
Let's see. I guess we would try it everywhere until we find it. Okay. Sorry. Let's see. Copy this. Oh, that's not going to be. Yeah, that's not going to be long enough for that, I don't think.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah. It doesn't seem like you would be able to, and that's a good point. Maybe there is somewhere you'd be able to search, and because there's really no reason you couldn't execute this just like a SE16 within SE16, because it's pulling back results the same way. But that is a good question. I will look that up and get back to you all on that.
Yeah. How about inside of Eclipse itself, like on the left-hand side under the Project Explorer?
Yeah. So there is a way, I know, at least on the HANA side, to find these views really easily. Yeah, without navigating down to it, there doesn't seem to be a way.
Okay. Well,
Yeah.
then let's take this. I'm going to record this question, and then we'll get it answered, and we'll get back to you, Keith.
Yeah, that was a good question, though. Okay. Yeah. So, all right. So for the next part, I'm going to go into a little bit more advanced view, where again, like Tony said, we're going to do some aggregate functions, and well, I'll just show you here. So let's see. So to create your next view, you could right-click, again, follow the same steps. Oops, folder. New, other, DDL source. And for this next one, we're going to be using this one here. View example costs. Boy, that's a mouthful. Let's see. Okay. Okay, so it's going to give us our boilerplate code. So we're just going to copy everything or highlight everything and, oops, copy over it again when I actually have the name. There. Okay, so again, we have to specify a different name, and it's basically the same. It looks very similar to the first one, except we have a few different things in this one. So first, you'll see that this association is basically just a table join. they say that instead of joined, if you can use associations because I guess it's more elegant or something like that, but really when you see association, that's basically just a join where you're joining two tables together. In this example, what we're doing is we're going to actually use our first view as the source for the second view. So this is the view we just created, this YJOHN CDS view example, and we're actually going to do a select from that, but we're actually going to join our records on this SNWD BPA table. So this is our partner table that has our business partners, our addresses, things like that. So we're going to join on the buyer ID equaling the node key, which is the primary key for the business partner table. So what we're basically going to do here, what this is saying is that our first field within this view is going to be the company name. So you want to know what company obviously is purchasing this. But what we're going to do is for every company, what we're going to do is we're going to sum up the gross amount of sales orders that they have, and then we're also going to count the number of sales orders that meet a certain criteria. So the criteria for counting this within our select is that the gross amount of the sales order is above $500. So basically this is like a scenario where let's say that there's we have a whole bunch of open sales orders. We want to see what company has sales orders above $500 and those sales orders are not paid. So I'm going back to our first view real quick. We're using our generated field payment status to basically drive the logic in our second view. And now this part down here is actually very important. So if you're going to be grouping things, let's say you want to sum something, you have to have like a summary criteria. We can't just sum. Like sum of one sales order is obviously whatever that gross amount is. So what we're saying is we want to group all the results by the company name. So we're saying for each company name, we want to know who the company is, what is the gross amount of their sales orders above $500 that aren't paid, and what is the total count of these sales orders. And again, this is another example. We could build whole reports. If you could imagine doing this in an ABAP program, you would have to basically select every single record from that SNWD SO table, every single sales order that's out there, bring all of that into your ABAP program, loop through, keep track of all of the distinct companies that you find, and then add up their gross amounts and their, the number of sales order they have. So not only is bringing all that data over going to take you forever, the loop, everything about that program is just going to take a long time. It's going to, cause a lot of bandwidth to be used, and there's a lot simpler way to do that with the CDS view. So here, with all this code in here, I'm going to go ahead and activate this. And I'm going to execute the CDS view. Oh, sorry, not execute. Sorry about that. We're going to right-click on here, and we're going to open a data preview. So you see how quick that was. That's the whole entire table with all the sales orders. So now we have all the results from every single company that is within that table, the total gross sales that they have that are exceeding $500, and the count of the sales orders. And you see that it only took 30 milliseconds to run. Now, if you could imagine doing that, in our system, pulling every single sales order back, summing them up, that would take obviously a lot longer than that. So again, this just shows the speed and the type of things you can add to the CDS views to basically speed up your system, speed up your processes. And for functional people, this kind of opens up a lot of opportunities for you. Like if you wanted to run a report like this for a user, it may not be possible to say, hey, let's just take a snapshot of all of our open sales orders, with a certain, gross amount limit and display it to our end users. It just wouldn't be possible because that would be running all day. It would take up a lot of CPU power, a lot of memory, and it just wouldn't be possible. But here, this is all that's coming back from the HANA database server. there's only 38 rows instead of millions of rows, and it only took 30 milliseconds to run. Yeah, now one requirement, one thing I forgot the first time I did this, because I added in these aggregate functions, the sum, the count, but you do require, it is required that you have a group by, because without a group by, let's see if I can just comment this out here. It's going to give you an error right here saying the group by clause is missing. Pretty straightforward, but so whenever you do this, you need to specify how you want to group this by. You know, we can perform a sum, but how do you want to sum it? You want to sum it by company? You want to sum it by city? Do you want to sum it by, you know, whatever field you want to sum it by that repeats? You know, you need to specify that on the bottom to be able to run this view. Okay. Any questions there, or? Okay. Well, all right. I will keep going to the last ABAP CDS example that I have here. And this one is just going to illustrate some parameters, which is another feature of the ABAP CDS. So let me right-click again. If you're following along, you can right-click here at the developer level, the package level, new, other, and again, DDL source. Let's see. Oh, that's what it is. Okay, I'm just going to grab the source again. Okay, so only I'm going to be changing this to a Y again, obviously. Oops. Okay, so this example is basically identical to the last one we did, but except this time, instead of having a set amount of, you know, the gross amount being greater than 500, what we're going to do is we're going to let that be a parameter that we're using. So this part, you know, you could obviously do this using, you know, a select statement. Like if you were to select from this CDS view from your program, you could just say where gross amount is greater than such and such. So this one wouldn't really require a parameter, but I threw in there as just an example. However, though, when we're talking about our case here, this case will basically, this case statement is going to be based off of a parameter that we're passing in. So this wouldn't be possible with just a select statement, because we can't dictate this case just by using a select from our program saying, hey, you know, this net only needs to be, what it's going to be is either a G or an N. So what this allows us to do is basically change the behavior or our CDS view, you know, on the fly. So what's going to happen here is if I pass in a G as the character, we're going to get a gross amount. But if I pass in an N as the net only character, it's actually going to do the net amount instead of the gross amount. So again, this is some of the ways you might want to use parameters, but there's also a whole bunch of different ways. Like if you wanted to pass in, you know, a multiplier, like you wanted to, I don't know, calculate tax on the fly, you could also pass that in and generate a new field in the same way we did here. Like if we wanted to, let's say, I don't know, do 2 times the gross amount, we could do 2 times gross amount. and then we could, this is another field, and we could say as double gross. Yeah. So, anyways, this is some of the things that you can do. You can build in logic into these CDS views, but for now, we're not going to add that on here. We're just going to run this view as is. Okay. So just like the other time, I'm going to activate it. And for this one, we're actually going to use a program because executing a select statement that for a CDS view that has parameters is actually just a little bit different than doing a regular CDS view. So what I'm going to do for that is I'm going to right-click over here so we can create another program. I'll put it in temp again. Let me just grab the program name. So the third example. CDS, I'll fix it later. Okay, and we can just hit finish. And the same way, this is where I copied the source from. So I'm going to select all and paste in this program. Example. Okay, I guess I did spell it right. Okay, now this is just like our first program, except on this one, when you're passing in parameters to a select statement, the way you do that is kind of like if you're a developer, obviously, you know how to pass in parameters to like a method. So you would have parentheses and the name of the parameter, threshold, and then equals the @ sign, and that's required here because to be able to call these new CDS views, you have to use a new OpenSQL. So use the @ sign before our parameter name, and then the second parameter, net only equals @ sign pmode. Okay, so what we're going to do here is we have a select where we're going to pass in the threshold of the dollar amount that is going to be, the cutoff. If the dollar amount of the sales order is above pthresh, then we're going to pull it in. And to determine whether or not we're going to use a gross amount or net amount, we're going to use this pmode parameter. And at the end, we're just going to loop through the results and print them all out. Okay, so to activate this, again, we're just going to hit this match. From here, we can hit our run button. We can provide, let's say that if it's more than, I don't know, $650, and we wanted them to print out the net amount. So these parameters are going to go directly into our select statement, and there's very little code needed. You can see that was very quick. We went through the whole table. I was pulled all the companies with sales orders greater than $600. The total amount of sales orders, and sorry, I have the European number layout, but the number of sales orders greater than that, and the total net amount of the sales orders that are greater than 600. Do we have some questions here, or is that a comment I see flashing?
No questions, but I got some stuff.
Okay.
Run back code for a second, right? So that the
sorry.
I'm using is called the terminology is called escaping the host variable. That pthresh and pmode are host variables, and that's how it knows in the new SQL. The difference between what's the syntax of the command versus what's an actual variable, at least in the new syntax. John also did an inline data creation of a table, right? Into table at data, LT data. If you notice, In the old days, we'd have to create a data statement saying and define the table ahead of time, right? Now, if we defined it incorrectly, right, and we tried to select into it, we always got an error saying that there's a type mismatch somewhere, either inside of the table or one of the fields, right? Which kind of meant that SAP knew what the table should have been. So starting in 7.2 of OPOP, and now we're at 7.5 at DLA, SAP allows you to do what's called inline declarations, which means you can actually, since it knows what it wants anyway, right? Because if it knew enough to throw an error in the old days, SAP. So why don't you just say at data, give it a name and parens, and I'll just create it for you based on the table that you want it to look like in the select statement. So there can never be an error anymore. So that's an inline data creation. I just wanted to point that out. Also, I texted in the chat box a link to two or three different ways, both in the GUI and inside of the ABAP developer tools, which is what this is called that John is in Eclipse. It's called the ABAP developer tools that we may be able to play with and validate, or now that everybody can see the link themselves, if you guys want to play. But we'll definitely play with it and get back to you with an official response of which ways worked for us and which ways didn't. So, but John, can you see that link in there, that archive link?
Okay, so open this up. Click here. Okay, yeah, I see it. Do you want to navigate there now, or?
No, I'm just saying, let's keep going with the webinar. But I mean, either the technically inclined or inquisitive can see it, and if they want to look while we're looking later, they can as well. But we'll come back with a definitive answer.
Okay. Okay.
But I think the answer's in there for both front end tools.
Okay.
So I don't see any other questions. So I guess let's just keep going.
Okay. So yeah, I mean, this was supposed to be a very basic examples, because I know some people here have a technical background, others have a functional. So I want to keep the examples simple, but I hope you all can at least see the potential this has for changing programs. There's some programs I know within the system that can run for a day, 2 days. You could, significantly reduce that time by running these programs. I think that opens up a lot of opportunities for redesigns in the future, if your client is switching over to HANA CDS. So yeah, I mean, you could get a lot more complex with these views. There's other functions, like there's coalesce one, which basically, if you have two fields, only one of them is to be populated. The coalesce function, you would say something like, coalesce field 1, field 2, and whichever one's populated will be returned in that value. And there's a whole list of them. I mean, we could probably spend another 2 hours on that. I'm sure you all don't want to do that. So, but if you want to research this is just to show you the potential that the CDS views have as a reusable resource for whatever projects you're working on. And for the last example, so this was all ABAP CDS. We're doing this all from our ABAP package, and it's fairly straightforward. I mean, once you get the hang of it, this doesn't take very much time to code up. It's very simple to execute something like that. Now, the other side of it is the HANA CDS. Now, that is actually much harder. So I was going to go through a quick example, the easy example I could put together, just to show you basically why you should avoid it, because it's a lot more difficult. But I'll just go through that example real quick, and then I guess we can take some more questions at the end. So for us to create our HANA CDS, we're going to have to leave our ABAP perspective. What you would have to do is open a SAP HANA development perspective, and to do that, you would click this box right here, which is open perspective. You would scroll down, and you would select this HANA development perspective right here. I already have it open, so I'm just going to navigate to it. And it looks very similar to what we saw. I mean, we can still see all of our code here, but we're now in a separate perspective, which allows us to do a few different things. First is just to make sure you're logged in, because it's just going to ask you later on anyways. You could click the Systems button and double-click on your HDB system. And that should prompt you to put in your password, which you can do. Oops. Okay. And then once you're logged in there, to create a HANA CDS view, what we're going to want to do is we're going to create a an XS project. So to do that, you come back over while you're in your SAP HANA development perspective. Right-click in the white space, select New, and then go down to Other. I apologize, sorry, not that. Right-click, hit New, Project, not Other. So I said Other, I meant to say Projects. And from here, you're going to find SAP HANA, Application Development, and then you're going to select this XS Projects and hit Next. You can name your project here, but for this to work with the copy and paste with the code I provided, you would have to type zjohn CDS. But since I already created that one, I'm just going to leave that project open. But this is what you would do. You hit Next. Select, this should just be only one listing here. It should say Default. You can select that workspace, hit Next, and I don't know if you all get this. I get a smart card prompts for some reason, even though I don't know. I don't know why it does that. So you can hit X or cancel over and over again until it goes away. It should be like 4 or 5 times. Okay. Then you can deselect these 2 buttons and then hit Finish. So with that done, we can go ahead and try to create our CDS view, or HANA CDS view, not ABAP, but HANA. You right-click on your project, select New, Other. All right, get out the ABAP package, and then go down to SAP HANA, Database Development, and hit DDL source file. And then from here, you can select the package you want to run this in, which will be the one you just created. I have a few extra because I've been playing around, but you would probably select the zjohn CDS one. And then for the file name, again, you can put zjohn CDS, and then hit Finish. And you'll see, like, even though this is a HANA CDS view, it looks very similar to the ABAP CDS view, except that it doesn't have all these annotations built in. It actually has this namespace part. And this namespace is actually the project that you put that in. So that's where that pulls that from. Okay, and for the code, I also have the code saved here. That would be the zjohn CDS HDB DD. So you can select that source, navigate back here, select all, and paste it in. And the one thing, like you saw that when we came in here, it actually said the schema was system. So the schema is just like the I'll navigate over here. You don't have to follow this. I'm just going to show you. The schema is actually the database schema that we're using. So HANA's, I guess, main database schema is the system schema. But for us, where all of our ABAP tables, our views, and things like that, even the ones we just created, are actually in this SAP A4H schema. So you just want to make sure that the schema you select is SAP A4H. Because if you don't, you're not going to be able to access this SNWD-SO table. And then looking at the code, this is identical to the first view we did, which I think should still be here. I mean, you can basically copy and paste after a certain point right into the HANA CDS one. The only thing that you kind of have to worry about is this capitalization. I couldn't figure out for basically an hour or two what was wrong with my view because the error message is kind of not very descriptive. But if your fields are not capitalized, it'll say basically this doesn't exist, and you'll be wondering why. So make sure all your field names are capitalized if you wanted to come back and create a HANA CDS view. Okay, so now with this done, what you can do is you can hit activate, which is this green arrow up top. Oh, let's see. Namespace does not match namespace. Y John CDS. Okay, whoops. That should work for you all. I have to change mine to a Y. I think this should work, hopefully. Okay, so it works. So now we just created a CDS view on the HANA side, on the HANA database. But the issue is that on the ABAP side, and you can go ahead and click back and go back to your ABAP perspective. The ABAP side, the data dictionary has no idea that this view even exists. So for us to access it, we're going to have to use native SQL to basically access it. Because, yeah, again, the data dictionary has no idea it's out there. So to do that, we're going to create a whole new program. And again, in the temp folder, the temp package. Oops, temp. Okay. And the name was, let's see, there, native SQL. Okay. And then we can select all, paste in the source. And for you all, this should just work as it is. And you know, this webinar isn't really covering native SQL, so I'm not going to go into too much detail about how this works. But just when you're doing a select statement, when you're doing the from, you have to specify the schema dot project name, 2 colons, and then the view name. So for me, this is actually a Y. And again, I mean, compared to this example, which was very simple, selects, pull it into our table, loop through. This one is obviously a lot more complicated. It breaks very, very easily. And then if you get an error message coming back, I mean, you're going to have to go into this object, see what the error message is, and it is a pain. This took me the most time probably out of the rest of these demos to create because I just couldn't get it to work right. So the point is, if you can avoid HANA CDS, I would. Now, the only case you would really use this is that since ABAP CDS is open, what that means is it can't support any features of HANA that aren't also features of the other databases. So if the HANA database supports some function or you know, something like that, but an Oracle database doesn't, the ABAP CDS is not going to be able to add that feature. Now the HANA CDS view may be able to do that, which is why you may have to use native SQL to access that. But other than that, there really is no reason to use the HANA CDS over the ABAP CDS. Okay, so moment of truth. I hope this works because this took a while to get it to work, but it may not. Okay, good, it works. Okay, and there it is. We have the same results, but with a lot more code, try statements, and a whole lot of extra steps that we could avoid if we just use the ABAP CDS instead. Were there any questions about this?
I do not see any questions. So,
Okay.
that's pretty interesting. So it's doing you're building the SQL statement on the fly and doing a create object based on a connection.
Yeah.
That's pretty good. Yeah. So does anybody have any questions at all? That I mean, because I think this is pretty much it, right, John? We're going to be wrapping up here.
Yeah, I mean, there's one more thing I could show, but I mean, it's just information. Like, it's not, there's not really much left after that.
Yeah. No questions yet.
Okay, which is a good thing or a really bad thing, but again, like if you were confused, I try to fit this in an hour, but the PowerPoint that I provided really goes through every single step, every click, you know, everything that we can that we've gone through will be on the PowerPoint. So if you need to go back, if you want to play with this a little longer to wrap your head around it, you should be able to follow the PowerPoint step by step and recreate everything we've done here.
Hang on. So let's see. Keith says, I missed the first couple of minutes, but is this on the horizon for DLA use in the future? Yes. After the upgrade, once the upgrade is completed, right, you probably have heard Brandon or Zeze talk in those all-hand meetings about where we're headed, right? So we are going to be doing more HANA type development, right? So there are probably going to be, I mean, DLA's been running a HANA sidecar now for quite a while as proof of concept, right? And it's been wildly successful in reducing, all kinds of run times, for trial balances and year-end closing and all of that, right? So at some point when we're all synced up on the upgrade and we're no longer, this oddball public sector customization of a creature that we created over the last decade, and we're in line with a public sector solution that has got most of, if not all of our code inside the delivered SAP solution, that opens up the ability for us to not do Suite for HANA, but to look at an RDS or a rapid deployment solution to put the suite on HANA. So that would be running 7.5 after a HANA database migration. And then once we do the database migration, which would happen after the upgrade, then there's the potential opportunity to look at all kinds of long-running custom stuff that we've done and take the code the way it is now and re-engineer it and maybe just innovate it in a way that's better using this type of technology. There's another type that we're going to do another presentation on called ABAP Managed Data Procedures, but CDS or Core Data Services is the most likely way that we would utilize HANA once the migration was done. So, then beyond that, Personas and Fiori, which address the front end, right? So if we make it faster and we increase the speed and of our development and make it more elegant, but we still have these screens with 50 tabs and 1,000 fields and all of that, the next way to make it simpler for the customer, which is DLA, would be to reduce that complexity as well, right? So it's sort of like a roadmap of going, first we have to do the upgrade. Once the upgrade is done, we have to do the database migration, do Suite on HANA, and then we do post the migration. There'll be a whole optimization project that's going to look at all the existing customization reports and programs and processes that we've done and seeing if we can speed them up to that race car of 800 times faster that SAP always sells. So that's what I believe, Keith Green, is the horizon. Will the standard sales order or purchase order tables? Yes, right? So when Suite on HANA happens, every table will be on. Well, so most every table will be on HANA. Any tables that are, trying to remember the types, those cluster type tables, you can't have cluster type tables on the HANA database, but we just went through this recently as part of the sidecar with DLA. They just get renamed and re-engineered to single transparent tables, which doesn't matter anymore because of the speed that HANA has, right? So yes, all at one point, Gennady, all of the suite and all the MM tables, procurement tables, everything is going to get moved over to HANA. Thinking of existing programs like revaluation, exactly, Keith. Revaluation, really long time to run due to large data sets, exactly. Their trial balance at DLA used to take I don't know, I'm just going to make it up, but at the last federal forum, there was a presentation, and you guys can find this on Google. If you Google HANA DLA Federal Forum, DLA presented the results, and there was something strikingly ridiculous where something that, trying to run like an entire trial balance for all of DLA was, I think, impossible. And now they can do it in 10 minutes, right, on the sidecar, right, because it's still a sidecar. But at some point, Gennady, will the standard SAP code base be re-engineered for HANA, right? So that's what Suite for HANA is. So when you hear about S4, like the letter S with the number 4/HANA, that's called Simple. McDermott's been running around since last Sapphire a year ago, talking about simple this, simple that. We're going to make everything simple. Everything's Hasso's going everything's too complicated, right? So yes, at some point there are going to be new sets of tables and a new code base that's going to be delivered with new modules, right? So what used to be FICO and finance and all of that is now called something like Simple Finance. There's going to be Simple APO or something called IBP for Integrated Business Processing, which is like the future APO. But in the interim between the two, there's not a public sector release of that yet. But there is a public sector release to migrate the HANA database from Oracle and put the existing suite as it stands on there, right? So hopefully I'm answering everyone's questions here okay. Is everybody still on the phone? Still there? Yeah, okay. Yeah. So exciting stuff. You got it, man. No, it really is. It's our future, right? So if you're a functional person, basically you've been stuck in a box, right? And what HANA's trying to do is blow that box up. So stuff that you couldn't think about doing before because it was ridiculous, either because the quantity of data that you needed to achieve it or the time used to be a box that was around you guys, right? So now, if we remove those boundaries from the functional or business process side, innovation is possible. From the developer side, this is our future, guys, right? So we have to learn this, and then, from the UX development side, that's where Fiori and Personas is more of a middle step, and then Fiori is the final piece, that's all going to be on HANA. So at some point, HANA is going to be where the public sector is. A lot of the commercial sector is there now. They ran all their sidecars, several years ago when HANA was first out. But if you notice, we're going to keep this up, and we're going to. If you follow our newsletters and our blogs, you'll see blogs on Personas coming up. There'll be blogs on Fiori. Fiori looks like your iPhone or your Android. Basically, there's apps. So when you click on a create a purchase order app, instead of seeing a million tabs and all of this kind of stuff, you'll see only the fields that you need to fill in, right? Because config fills in 90% of the fields anyway, right? So to show all them to DLA was just the way SAP did it initially, right? But it's all about simplifying, right? Simplifying and speeding things up. So if there's no more questions, I'm going to let John wrap this up. And when we are done, probably within by Monday, there'll be a website that I'll email out, not a website, a URL that I will email out to everybody, and it will probably be in our news stuff, our news area on our website. There'll be a link, just like there was for the HANA Express one, that you'll be able to watch this recording at your own pace again, because it'll all be out there. But go ahead, John, take it back.
Okay. Yeah, and this last little piece is probably a little out of order. I probably should have done it immediately after the ABAP CDS view portion, but it's just to show you what happens on the HANA side once we create one of these ABAP CDS views. So, and just in case someone asks, I don't know, someone says, how does this all work? How do the views replicate over to the HANA side? If we were to take one of these views, and we went back to our HANA administration console, you see that this is a name and R on the ABAP side of our CDS entity. But if we were to go over to the SAP HANA administration console, and we can I think we can right click here. Yes. And then you could find table. We could paste this in here. If I copied it, sorry. Copy, okay. All right, I guess it doesn't let me do that, so let's just try typing it out. Why John test view. So you can see these are our other ones. This was the one we just created. This is the HANA CDS view, and then here is the replicated ABAP CDS view. So you can see it has the different fields that we defined, and it also has the create statement. That is basically exactly what we created on the ABAP side. So just to throw that in there as well, if you're ever wondering how this works, how is it that our code gets executed on the HANA side, it's because once you activate that ABAP CDS view, it will create a view of that view name on the HANA database, and this is actually what gets executed on the HANA side to pull back the data. Okay. And sorry, I just want to throw that in there just in case someone one day, asks you, how this works or whatever. But pretty much, yeah, that's all I had. So if there's no more questions, I'm pretty much done, Tony.
All right, guys. Any more questions? I think I got to everyone of the questions that I had. We'll go back and take a look at that archive.sap.com discussion thread. There were several Keith, the gentleman who started that thread, asked like almost the exact question that you did about finding these views, and there were several answers both from the GUI side as well as from the technical side inside of the ABAP development tools inside of Eclipse. So John and I will play around with that, and we will definitely, get back to you with an answer definitively on how to do it. So everybody have a great weekend. I am going to officially stop our recording now. All right. Everyone have a great weekend, and, we'll all catch up again next week. Take care.
All right. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.